actually not figured out what to call this, because technically I did season 2, but this season is going to be different since it's going to be broadcasted on a different channel. So maybe it's like 2A. Maybe we should do something classical, like it's the something different edition. But my guest
Or,
today,
or, or, or actually, I think you should have a station name. I think
lone guitarist.
K KRB XRM 96.3
That would
Bentint. You got
uh, that'd be
you
cool. But
gotta you gotta have like something really catchy at the beginning.
I did. I'm working on the splashes,
Uh-huh.
the arrival screen for all of these, and it's just me playing Scarlatti. I wish it was. I
Nice.
wish it was something cooler. But my guest today is Adam Levin. He plays guitar pretty well. Big EPK that I was rifling through, and the less experienced interview in me would have just read off all of his stuff on his EPK, but then we'd be here for 45
Yeah,
minutes.
they can just read that and be bored and then move on to their favorite Netflix show.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, of course, Ben. Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. It's always wonderful to talk shop, talk guitar, talk not guitar, whatever.
Yeah. Well, you're in for a treat because I got some fun questions for you. But
Nice.
let's just talk about what you've been up to. I mean, like I was saying before I hit the record button, a lot of these episodes were done during the pandemic. So a lot of times I was like asking people how they were surviving the pandemic, but things are starting to
Mhm.
pick up. And I've seen you on the road a couple times in
Mhm.
Boston and in Connecticut. So you're just like back at it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I never really stopped. That's not part of my vernacular, stopping. So the pandemic, even though it was like a little bit of a roadblock, I sort of just uh, picked up that roadblock and threw it into the ground and had splatter all over the ground and kept moving. And I think, in some ways, musicians, I don't count myself alone in this, but we're pretty agile human beings and spontaneous and erratic at times. And so I think this was a unexpected pause for many of us, but we just refocused and moved on to a lot of different things. I mean, I couldn't be on stage all the time, but I took the time to do a lot of recordings. I took the time to get in shape. I took the time to, practice rep that I hadn't practiced in a long time, or I think honestly, I think one thing we can forget, actually, I'm not going to even say that I forget to do at times is just dream. We're always just like in the muck, in the moment, just trying to like survive, and we forget, what this is all about in the first place, which is dreaming, coming up with like you're the best version of yourself, regardless of any obstacles.
That was very, I feel like you channeled Veslaki there. Like that's something he would have said when you're
Oh,
talking
David was like,
about,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
totally, totally, yeah.
um,
That's
I need to
very
get,
presidential.
I need to get him on here too. Yeah, no, I hear you. And I definitely agree that there's something to be said about like, it's just like a very easy trap to fall into of just like, when's the next gig and get the next gig,
Mhm.
this and that. Not even just like gig in terms of like performances, but just like the next thing and this and that.
Mhm.
And that's done and you drop that and you move forward. And I'm experiencing a little bit of that now. I have a little bit of a different uh, um, classical guitar plays a little bit of a different role in my life than it does of yours. I don't make my money exclusively through classical guitar. I teach in a public school, but
Mhm.
right now we're preparing for a concert, and it's very much like drill, grind, 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 grind. And I forgot how much of that I don't like. I like a lot of it, right? But
Mhm.
then a lot of it is like, oh, I forgot how much I like. I want to do this for me. I
Yeah.
want to learn this piece because of me, not because of this deadline that's approaching. But that's a part of our world like that exists. You can't escape that. It's just how you deal with it. But
Totally.
so what kind of stuff are you doing right now? I know you are I would say that since your name came into my orbit maybe as I was in grad school, so maybe like
Mhm.
8 years ago, something like that.
Mhm.
I would say each year I have watched you do more and more and more.
Hmm.
So it seems like you are nonstop today.
Yeah, I mean, from I was sort of built to do the nonstop lifestyle, and that's very particular to my own desires and my own choices. And I always tell young people, people who are aspiring to get into this career, that this career is about choice. You can decide to focus on one thing or multiple things or a million different things. It's all up to you. And somehow I've sort of fallen into this cycle of trying to be as vast as possible. And so, what that means is I love doing chamber music.
Mhm.
I've got three chamber music groups that I adore beyond anything else: the Great Next Guitar Trio, Duo Montar with mandolin and with violin, Duo Sonidos, and then there's the whole the solo gambit with a lot of new commissions. I spent three of the best years of my life in Spain, and sort of fell into a, I guess, another cycle of commissioning the best living Spanish composers of the last four generations, and so all of this, as it sort of rolls and tumbles in the in this machine and try to make order of all of it, it's real. It's each one of them could be a ship unto itself, and
Right.
trying to manage it and keep it all afloat. And on top of that, while serving these artistic pleasures of mine, and I also don't want it to be all about me and my own pleasures, but also about driving the classical guitar forward. And I've tried to do that in part through Kithara Project, which is this nonprofit organization that I co-founded with Matthew Rohde uh, in 2015, and basically we're driving classical guitar education in areas that don't have access to it, and for a public that can be underserved and unable to afford music education. So it's a and then also I do teach at the university level, and so there's all these facets. It's a big soup of artistic material that somehow I have to parse through and maintain, and also ensure that they're fresh,
Yeah.
and that I don't go into overdrive too long and burn out the engine. I think taking care of myself is and my family
Yeah.
is especially with a kid now, a major priority.
How old is your son?
So Avi, he is 16 months this month.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, he is growing like a weed, and he has me pumping cylinders at max rep at all. I mean, you know it as well as anybody,
Yeah.
that it's something that keeps you it in and of itself keeps you fresh and
Yeah.
on your toes or heels, or whatever, or toes and heels, keeps you walking.
You know what's nice about this the story that you're sharing about all the things that you're doing is that uh, um I in doing these interviews and then just being a part of the generation of guitarists that I am, there's a lot of people that have to do a lot of things because uh the model of a Segovia or a John Williams or a Bream doesn't really exist anymore. Or rather, there are so many people that are so good that there are no spots available to just be a performer and to
Mhm.
make such a living off of that where you don't have to do anything else. But what you're sharing is that not only do you do other things, but you want to do them because so many other people
Mhm.
are forced to do other things and don't want to do them,
Mhm.
and therefore they don't create good products. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. So I mean,
So
the,
that's
the
wonderful.
scary thing is spreading yourself too thin where you don't function
Yeah.
highly in any one of the facets. So it is a tightrope act in that sense. But yeah, the desire, that is a choice, and to pursue all these different facets of a classical musician's career.
Right.
And it's yeah, it's a it's rocky, and you need your Humvee, electric Humvee, no, not gas guzzling Humvee, but
Right. Right. Of
electric
course.
Humvee,
It goes without
to
saying.
go over all this terrain.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's I guess what am I working on right now? To go back to sort of pinpoint and focus what we're chatting about. I'm working on a couple concertos right now. One of them is a new double concerto that my musical partner Jacob Rubin, the mandolinist from Duo Montar, and I commissioned a couple years ago now, and we just received from Avner Dorman, who's this incredible exclamation point, underline, triple underline, Israeli American composer. He's really hot and in right now, and he wrote this fabulous piece that Jacob introduced me to when we first started playing together, a mandolin concerto by Avner Dorman. Which, if you don't know it, people out there listening, check it out. It brings together all the musical traditions, I feel, in one piece. And so I was immediately lusting over the possibility of having one of his pieces for myself.
Yeah.
And we worked tirelessly to fundraise for this major concerto and made it a reality. So we're going to be premiering actually at my guitar festival in October, and it's for mandolin, guitar, and string orchestra. It's going to be a 20-minute wild ride. I'm really, and the thing is, like, just like investing in penny stocks
Mhm.
or in the stock market, you never know if you're going to reap benefits, if you're going to if you're going to tank or you're going to become the next multimillionaire. And in the music world, you don't know if I think the multimillionaire part is probably not going to happen, but I guess you could say you become a multimillionaire in the sense that there are repeat performances.
Right.
That's a dream that is not a one hit wonder.
Right.
And many times is one of the most difficult things is to transcend the guitar, get into the general music world, and have something other than the Concerto de Aranjuez performed over and over again.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot in there, and I definitely can resonate with the idea of like you can play a great piece and it can be good, but there's a certain sustainability that some pieces just don't have.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make them a bad piece. It just means that maybe it's the connection between the piece and the player, and you don't quite figure that out. I don't think until you can play the piece really well.
Yeah.
And there's even pieces that I know, like there's a piece like I'm looking at the Black Decameron again, right? Like, and I
Mm-hmm.
know that for me that's going to be a piece that I can hold on to for a long time. Whereas there's pieces that I play that are much harder, and just and good great pieces, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm like, you know what? I don't see myself getting the benefits. But of course, the Black Decameron is a tried and true piece, right? We're talking about pieces that are new that you
Never heard before.
invest a lot of time that you could be spending on things that you're going to be able to play well, right? Like
Yeah.
running through Leyenda is never a bad idea because you're
Mm-hmm.
probably going to bust it out somewhere.
Yeah.
But I definitely hear you. Go ahead.
I think for me, you know, I can spend all day recreating the wheel in hopefully a fresh way. I mean, we do that with all the standard rep. But for me, what's most important, especially as I sort of aim to push the instrument and classical guitar education system forward, is to be bold and to champion the future standard repertoire. And I have no idea if that's going to work or not, but
Right.
I like the idea of taking that risk.
There's so much.
And being mhm.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's pretty simple. It's just I enjoy that risk taking. It's like going if you're going to go on a wild rampage and rob a bank. You don't know if you're going to if you're actually going to get the money and then get out. And I'm not saying I'm going to rob any banks. So if the FBI is listening, I'm not robbing any banks.
Listen, I'll tell you who the listeners are. It's my mom and dad, and then
And
whoever,
my parents.
and your parents. Yes,
Yeah.
and none of them work for the FBI.
Yeah, exactly.
What was I going to say? You know, it's interesting because the guitar, the nature of the guitar in our part of the world, and actually most of the world too, but especially America, is such a folk instrument. And what I mean by folk is that it is in the forefront of society. And we have so many crossovers between things that I'm sure you know could be classical and fingerstyle, right?
Yeah.
And so and when it doesn't take it takes going outside of the US to see how fingerstyle guitar just in general is all over the world. And it's only kind of like nerdy or poo-pooed on like in America, right? Because we're like, oh, you should play if you're gonna play guitar, play electric guitar, right? That's the
Mhm.
cool thing. And but then you go like, I don't know, like fingerstyle Latin American music. Is that classical guitar? Not really, but it also kind of like classical guitar, first of all, is a misnomer and such a weird name for something that we do. But you go to Latin America or you go to parts of Europe and music that's not composed in that classical tradition, and it's finger picked on, you know, it's fingerstyle on
Mhm.
like a nylon string guitar. And so when I hear you talking about that, you're talking about making the classical guitar cool, which is something that I want to do.
Yeah.
And there's no reason that it shouldn't be. And it doesn't mean that we're going to play Bach all the time. And
Mhm.
that stuff is great for guitar, and I love it, and thank God it's here. But I agree with you that the new repertoire for the classical guitar has to have something that is more inclusive, both culturally in terms of where people's family of origin is from, but
Mhm.
also in terms of accessibility. Because if the only way to play classical guitar is to read the Villa-Lobos studies, if your ultimate goal of getting like decent at the guitar is to go Duncan book one
Mhm.
into Villa-Lobos,
Love the Duncan books, by the way.
great books.
They're
One of the
they're
best.
they're, they're those are underdog uh, repertoire books.
But if that's the only way to do it, then we're just going to make ourselves, we're going to continue to be in that exclusive box
Mhm.
of in order to come see the classical guitar, you have to go to university and you got to pay a ticket and you got to wear a suit and you don't know when to clap and like all of those things that I think we're on the same page would be good to rid some of that.
Yeah, totally. No, I think that we have to break down these barriers whenever possible, without diluting it. I think accessibility is very important. Obviously,
Yeah.
if the gut feeling of people walking out is not good, it's not gonna be sustainable. But we also have an obligation to educate and to include and to be sophisticated in a way that is inclusive.
For sure.
I do see um, a wave, a train of thought in the classical guitar where you get great players who get sucked into I don't sort of a track of sort of spinning the wheel again on things that have already been done because they are only accessible, and they don't push the instrument further.
Right.
And they are. I think we can challenge. We should not undermine or we should not expect that our audience is not going to understand it because they will. They're sophisticated. They're intelligent people and audience members. So I think we should, while being accessible, also pushing them to their limits. And that's otherwise you don't know. So I also I think the safe route, and you see this in some new recordings again with some very high level players who regress to a repertoire that is tried and true, fantastic repertoire. Don't get me wrong, but again, it's been done over and over again. You're recreating,
Right.
recreating the same thing, and that to me is a waste of resources, talent, creativity, and an opportunity, especially at the high end, when you get these individuals who are really good, excellent, the best in the game, who don't take that opportunity and the fact that they're extraordinarily visible to push the instrument forward.
Right. Right. Yeah,
And,
and I want to talk about how you do that specifically with your projects, but let's get a little bit of backstory. What's
yeah,
your How did you get drawn to the instrument? Were you an electric player beforehand? Where'd you get your education? Talk about your just experience with this instrument.
sure. So, in a nutshell, I learned the guitar from my dad. He is a clinical psychologist by trade, but is is also an amateur classical guitarist, fingerstyle guitarist. He's a very accomplished musician. I mean, when I was young, he would go to the office and treat patients, but then you come home, play the Bach Chaconne, the 12 Villalobos etudes. I mean, he would give like serious recitals,
Wow, wow.
and very accomplished. And so he was the guy, the person who just stuck a classical guitar in my hand from the beginning. Usually that's not typical. Usually you get electric guitar, acoustic guitar, rock and roll, and yeah, this was a special case. And I started when I was about 6 years old, and yeah, it was really great. He was my first teacher. Then I had this Japanese teacher, Shinobu Sato, who got me up and running real fast. He he was an incredible guitarist based outside Chicago. He'd come over for weekly lessons, and it was like a rampage through repertoire.
Yeah.
And then after that, I worked with Paul Henry, also in the city. Paul Henry, actually, if you get the 20 source studies, Segovia source studies, if you get the new edition with the CD, he's the person who recorded the 20 source studies. So he
The red and black book.
was, yeah, the Red and Black Book, exactly, which, by the way, I love. I think those are some of the best works by Soar out there. And then I studied with Ann Waller and Mark Maxwell, and then I went on to continue my studies at Northwestern University, where I did a double degree program in classical guitar performance psychology and pre-med.
Oh, holy shit.
So at one point, yeah, it was a very, very demanding undergrad experience. Yeah,
Oh my God.
there's not a moment where I wasn't studying or practicing. So yeah, I had this sort of pipe dream that one day I would be a physician and a touring classical guitarist, or a psychiatrist, or whatever, what have you. But I quickly learned that if I was going to pursue music, it was going to take my heart and soul and everything. So I couldn't really divorce myself from the idea of leaving music, then going to medical school, which is very all inclusive. You can't think about anything else. Um, so I ultimately decided to continue down the path with music, even after having gone down hardcore a science path and psychology path, and then went on to complete my master's at New England Conservatory with Elliott, but this Elliott Fisk. But the interesting thing is, I actually had studied with Elliott Fisk for the previous 5 years. While I was at Northwestern University studying with Ann Waller, I supplemented those studies by taking private lessons with Elliott. And the deal was, I had studied, I had applied to the Tufts University 5-year double degree program with NC. In the end, I thought that Northwestern was a better fit and a better school, so I went there. But the catch was, I was going to find a way to maintain this relationship with Elliott, and so I would fly out to see Elliott every 5 weeks or so, and It was incredible. It was immersive. It was like those old. It felt like those old time apprenticeships. I really sort of imbibed the the Elliot Fisk Kool Aid and
Yeah.
history, and it, that that doesn't happen often these days. And feel very fortunate. He was not only just like a incredible guitar instructor, but he was also a mentor and a guide and a guiding force who continues to be a guiding force in my life. And so, and that's, I think, so important is that the cutoff or the beginning and ending of a teacher student relationship um, for me is amorphous because that's how it was my entire life. Like
Mm.
these people who taught me have been part of my life forever.
Yeah.
Elliot being one of them. Also, I was in. I went to study with Oscar Ghiglia in Siena for 4 years, 4 summers straight. I mean, it was the creme de la creme. I
Yeah.
mean, not what the way that Oscar teaches is poetry. It's the closest thing we'll ever get, I think. And I've seen a lot of master classes and teaching styles. The closest thing we'll ever get to Segovia. I mean, I wasn't, I'm not old enough to do that, but
I'm gonna
Gillia's
say
amazing, and
something.
he's got a very particular style.
I'm gonna say something bold.
Yeah,
Gilia better than Segovia.
I think,
Change my mind. Fight me.
yeah, no, no, I don't, I actually, in some ways, agree with you. I think the thing that perhaps one reason that Gillia surpassed Segovia is he was a people's person. He broke down the sort of like teacher student barrier. Like you approach me as my student and nothing more. And Gillia, I think to some extent was also a colleague and a friend and a guide. I mean, he's an extraordinary individual and very principled. He didn't care, um, who you studied with. He is there to carry on a certain message from through his own eyes from the composer, and very very diligently and poetically.
I also think I definitely agree with you, and I also think that Gilia, he's you know what I should reach out to him because I'd love to have him.
Oh, he would be amazing.
He I've met him several times,
Hmm.
and I've seen a lot of his master classes going to the University of Hartford. He came there quite frequently, and I've had some great talks with him. He actually yelled at me once. Just because I said something that was a little bit wrong about a piece, and I still go back to that, and I'm like, oh, that helps me play the piece better. It was the homage
Hmm.
to Debussy, but I think something that he was maybe lucky to have was living in a generation where then things got developed on the guitar a little more, because as much as Segovia had this wonderful gift and he was a part of this really well educated class of musicians who, I'm not knocking Segovia, but Segovia didn't have then the development and the life experience of watching the guitar develop in a period of his life where then he could go also incorporate that into his playing. So case in point, you listen to a lot of his old recordings and you're like, wow, the tone does not sound very good, right? That's something that you could say. And I would say to that, well, in his formative years, in the years where he was developing, he was one of the few playing like that kind of music, right? So
Hmm.
counterpoint made sense to play counterpoint that way, right?
Hmm.
Whereas someone like Elliot Fisk, who studied with Segovia for a while, right,
Hmm.
and Oscar Ghiglia and Michael Lorimer and all these other like intermediate generation people, they saw the guitar transform and then were able to reflect back on that and say, well, how much of that do I want to take? You know,
Hmm.
not play
Hmm.
strictly Spanish guitars. Gilia plays a Kono, right? And so so I think that like time, like generation wise, that was a big thing for them too. Before we leave the idea of the story of your education, could you just, I mean, you talked a little bit about mentorship. what was something that Fisk or Ghiglia, two huge people in your life, gave you in terms of playing and musicianship, if you could be specific?
Well, I would say Gilia, the importance of intervals, and I would say with Elliot, vibrato. He has a very idiosyncratic vibrato that is a marriage between the sort of side to side
Hmm.
vibrato and then the rock vibrato of up and down. So it's circular,
Yeah.
and it's reminiscent of the type of vibrato that you hear from cellists or violinists. It if you'll hear it in Segovia, you'll hear it in his playing, and I've over a long period of time tried to cultivate it myself, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things. It really sings.
Yeah.
I think, and that lineage from Segovia, Gilia, Fisk. Um, I think the romanticism is the common thread, the lyrical thread. Um, Always being a singer before you are a guitarist, um, and that's the heartstring
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
that really propels all of them forward as artists. So I think, yeah, I mean, intervals, um, understanding the harmony beneath the piece, the historical context for the piece, um, and yeah, and just also just like a love for um, the new repertoire of the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's move on to a little bit. Let's go on to this idea of because I want to hear you talk more about the Kithara stuff,
Yeah, sure.
but I also want to hear about like the philosophy behind it, not just like the mechanics of how it works, but like you've expressed these ideas of like we need to be high quality musicians to respect the instrument, right? We need to know what we're doing and have good education, but we don't need to we need to shed the idea that the only way to exist is in this exclusive club where the only people who are seeing us are people that like deserve to see us, right? And
Hmm.
you're trying to dismantle this idea that like it can be, as performers we can know the complicated stuff, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you the listener have to know the complicated stuff in order to really appreciate the music or understand like I would say, I don't know, maybe 85% of what the listener hears isn't complicated, right? What's complicated?
Hmm.
Learning the piece, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the hard stuff. But to be able to appreciate it or appreciate the story of a piece, right? So how do you take kind of like that philosophy that you were communicating and then go create a project where you're working with kids and educating people that don't might not have access to this?
Well, I think there's a couple things you're talking about. You're one thing is you're talking about dismantling sophistication, so it's understood that there's like a baseline vernacular for the audience to understand the music, um, old or young. And I think when you go to a concert, you walk out with a very simple feeling. It's either good or bad,
Right.
um, or maybe it's mediocre, maybe it's sort of in between. But I think, yeah, as you said, the complicated part it lies in the performer, but making it distilling it down to its salient features in a way that can be digestible um, is the hard part. Making it sound easy, giving it context for it to sound pleasant to the ear, whether it's a new piece of music or something from 5 centuries ago. So that is important whether you are dealing with an audience that's in their 80s or 90s or an audience that is um, under 10 years old. The same thing goes. If you and honestly, if you can't please a an audience of 10-year-olds or younger, you can't please an audience of 50 plus or whatever. or in between. Honestly, the most important thing, I'm sort of missing it. The most important is what's in between the 20 to
Right.
50,
Right.
because as they mature, you want them supporting. You want to be filling the coffers with smart listeners, people who are just interested in the classical guitar. So we tend to focus on, well, childhood music education. Then there's a sort of like muck in the center that we sort of that we're trying to gain access to, and then we have like the sort of the gray-haired folks who tend to show up at classical music concerts. But we really have to, I think, create the assembly line from the beginning of life to the formative years and high school and college, and through your 20s and 30s, and that will create longevity and sustainability in your audience. But the reason for I wanted to start from the ground up with Kithara Project. I mean, Kithara Project was created because I love the guitar, you know, and I love sharing it. I love sharing it on stage. I love sharing it in the classroom, and I wanted to create a model that of education, in that could live beyond me. Um, and and Kithara Project was that answer. And its mission is to improve the lives and all that comes with of young people, children, and youth through the classical guitar, and building a community minded um, program or programs um, that delivers first class classical guitar education to students. So they have individual instruction, group instruction. They get mini intensive residencies from guest artists. They have performance opportunities.
Right.
They are sponsored to go to world class events like Boston Guitar Fest, like the University of Rhode Island Guitar Festival.
Mm-hmm.
And the key is at no charge to them. It is
Yeah.
tuition free, and that breaks down, that shatters the barriers. And I think with that, we do create a contract with the families and their children. It's like we're going to go on the line. We're going to go out of our way to enable you the opportunity to do this. And all we ask is that you respect the teachers, you practice, and you give it your whole heart.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, they're gaining access to a transformative experience, something that transformed my life, transformed Matthew Rohde's life. And we were fortunate to have our parents drive us to our lessons, and have the resources to have those lessons week in and week out. But that doesn't always exist. In fact, most of the time it doesn't.
Right.
And so I think that servicing, being an ambassador for the guitar, hopefully, means being in service of this art, and creating infrastructure that is sustainable um, forever, and that can be expanded, contracted, and other people. I mean, it can be like the Peaceful Fight Club, for example. You can
Right.
have your Kithara Project Mexico City, which we do. We have our Kithara Project Boston, which we do. We have Kithara Project Albuquerque, which we do. In the future, we'll have Kithara Project Detroit, Chicago, New York, and so it's this network of of um, of students that are tied together by the guitar in their pursuit of improving themselves through the instrument. And so it's really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a blast. I mean, I won't say we're the only initiative out there doing this, but we're certainly one of the very few that does it without financial constraint, and we with the support of grants and
Right.
patrons and stuff like that. But it's definitely, it's trench work. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
the beauty of it happens in about 1 millisecond. And that 1 millisecond is when you see them, when you see the kids with the guitars in hand, uh, working, using the peripheral vision, using their left hand, their right hand, this sort of multi component approach to playing the guitar, and it's like it's unbelievable seeing them do this. And for me, in that millisecond, that's all I need, and that's and I'm sold.
Right, right.
I'll continue to do this work, and hopefully others will as well.
What is the geography of most of the students? Are you servicing a lot of inner city kids?
Yeah, so in Boston, we're um, our programming is in Alston, Brighton, which is right outside the city
Yep.
center, and we have students from Middle Eastern families, North African, Asian families,
Yeah.
African American students, uh, Hispanic students,
Sure.
uh, and in Albuquerque, it's a primarily Hispanic student base, and then of course in Mexico City, we have all Mexican students. So
This is so first of all, I think it's great what you're doing. And then tied to that, another positive is like I grew up in this world, in this music world where we put white European musicians at the top, right?
mhm,
And that's not, I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that it's like just something we do, right? And then you get into this classical guitar world, and for the most part, it's white guys. There's some women, and then very few people of color, unless, especially Americans of color.
mhm,
Lots of I have met a good portion of people of color from either Europe or South America, right? But
mhm,
it's like this club that we make that is like so exclusive. And why, and then you dig on another layer, right? It's like, well, why would somebody from a culture that where the music isn't representative of their culture, why would they be interested in it, right? Like if
mhm,
that instrument has no connection to you or your family, and the instrument that the music that we play on it is from another part of the world completely, then why would I want to study it?
yeah, there's no relevance.
Until you take a step outside of that and realize there is music written by black composers, right? There is music written by Mexican composers, by these communities in the United States that are marginalized. And then we say, no, wait, this is, let me show you why this is for you. Don't. So I love what you're doing because it's off. It's showing that there is more than one path to this instrument, and there's a good reason to love this instrument. And I think that's wonderful, because I think not only is it a misnomer to call it classical guitar, because we don't play classical era music
Mhm,
exclusively, right?
mhm,
But then to also say, oh, but then we're also going to play, music from, I don't know, Brazil from 50 years ago. Well, is that also classical music? Well, that's hard to say. It's composed music, right? So I think it's wonderful what you're doing, and I don't think I'm using the words to give it justice, but I
it,
think that's great.
it's a cross-cultural platform, um, and you can really, I mean, we've done many things to pronounce that aspect of Guitar Project more. Like we make pen pals out of students in Albuquerque and Mexico,
Yeah.
Mexico and Detroit, Boston and Mexico. We triangulate,
Right.
and it's all about being creative in the delivery of this education. The
Yeah.
education is, in its essence, blind.
Yes.
It really is. I mean, we're born into this planet blind of socioeconomic status, race, this or that.
Right.
We're born basically with a smile on our face and ready to absorb what we receive. So with that, we have a even more important responsibility of imprinting a vast amount of information on our students, and that we're trying to give the Kithara Project students, and any student that comes our way, a diverse body of repertoire that comes from many different traditions, some familiar, some foreign, and just have a great time. I think
Yeah,
we need enjoyment, especially with all the conflict and adversity and difficulty we're having in getting along with neighbors near and far. Music is definitely this escape, and it's also it transports us so easily and portably to cultures near and far. So it's a win-win. I mean, I don't have to tell you that,
for sure.
um,
Sure.
uh, but Kithara Project has been a great source of pride for me because it's been my small way of giving back to the classical guitar community or the future and also to the future of it.
Mm.
And we actually one of the really cool things we did this year is we completed a music school in our Mexico City program, which was a monumental accomplishment for us
Yeah.
of modest means, and we came up with this idea because the Mexico City program, which takes place in this community called Yugalito, which is in a area called Iztapalapa, a notoriously dangerous neighborhood in Mexico City, and basically the community dedicated a plot of land. They donated it to us, and we decided to create a capital campaign, fundraise. A local Mexican architect gave their time and creative
Wow.
efforts, and 5 years later, we're standing in a brand new music school, and it's really cool. In fact, the architect just won an award for not only the design of this music school, but several, two or three other um, structures that they designed in this last couple of years. So it's been really special, and that that covers it all. I mean, it's a safe haven for creativity um, and barring some natural disaster, it'll be here forever. And that's what's so cool for me is that even when I put my last stamp in the passport and move on from this world, that music school will still be
Yeah.
intact, and students will be learning classical guitar. So
Yeah.
it's been a wild ride, and yeah, I invite everybody out there who's listening to check out kitharaproject.org. And if
We'll
it
put it.
resonates with you,
We'll put a
we
link up.
hope you'll support it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to hit you with the Lone Guitarist 5-question questionnaire, and
Please
you
hit
can
me.
answer these in any form you want: short stories, single answers, whatever comes to you. Okay.
Great, let's do
Are
it.
you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get a good stretch in first. Okay. I need some more coffee. Adam
Yeah.
Levin, question number one: what is the best gig you've ever played?
Kennedy Center, 2016. That was a fantastic uh, performance with string quartet. We played the Tedesco Quintet, among other Tedesco songs. So that was pretty cool. I think that was, yeah. Let's stick with that.
Question number two: what is the worst gig you've ever
Oh, woo-hoo.
had?
So I would say um, there was a gig that I had in Portland, Maine. This was like really early on in my performing career. And Will and I ended up in this venue, and there was like three people in the audience. And one of them got up and said, "Wait, I thought there was going to be a tango dancer here." And I was like, "Oh no, we're just playing tango music." And he got up and left, and then we just gave the performance for two people, and the amount of money that we got was barely enough to pay for our cup of clam chowder afterwards. So that was worst gig.
What question number three? What never fails to inspire you?
What never fails to inspire me? Um, hmm, that's a interesting question. I would say holding the guitar and um, and having a supportive family. That support is inspiring.
Yeah. Question number 4. What is the best piece of advice you've received and who gave it to you? Or just what is your amalgamation of that, your summary of it?
Hmm. I would say um, I mean, this is sort of in the spirit of the Elliott Fisk education that I received, and that's despite the you know, let's start again. when when you don't receive the opportunity that you were looking for, make it yourself. Don't wait.
Mm,
Yeah.
I
So
like
when it,
that a lot. I like that a lot.
yeah, it's like don't wait around. Seize the moment and and create that opportunity for yourself.
Good. Just do it, you could say.
Just do it. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's an Elliot Fisk quote. Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, just no is not an option.
Right, right.
That would be that I for me. I mean, that would be my recommendation to the next generation. Is no is not an option.
Yeah, yeah. Question number 5, your last question on the questionnaire. What is your favorite non-guitar thing to do for fun at this moment?
Oh, spend time with Avi, my
You don't have to
60.
say that. He's not gonna watch it
Yeah,
for this interview
yeah.
for a while.
No, I would say that he's. I mean, that's the new, almost the newest thing in my life.
Yeah,
That I would say Avi and Ornella. I have so little time, so and they're they're the loves of my life.
that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to stop the record button right